Imagine this. You've been away, serving your country, fighting for a cause bigger than yourself. But when you come home, you find something worse than anything you could have imagined. 35 luxury homes on your land. And the worst part? They weren't even supposed to be there. But don't worry, I had a plan. Let me take you back a bit. My name's Jake Morrison. I'm 34, a proud veteran, and the third-generation owner of 47 acres of prime land just outside Austin, Texas. This land wasn't just property. It was part of my bloodline. My grandfather, Pops, bought it in 1955 when Austin was still a sleepy town. Back then, barbecue joints outnumbered tech companies by 1,000 to 1. Pops wasn't the kind of guy who just saw land as a resource. He saw it as a legacy. That's why, in 1978, he built a small earth dam on the property. Nothing fancy, just solid engineering to collect rainwater for our cattle and help out the neighbors during dry spells. The Army Corps of Engineers helped him design it, and Pops always said that someday this back 40 acres would be worth something special. But for now, it was just beautiful rolling hills where we ran cattle, hunted, and spent time together as a family. I went on to serve 2 tours in Afghanistan, where I worked on water management and infrastructure. Trust me, when you build wells and manage water in a war zone, you learn a lot about its value. You see how fast people will fight over it, how precious clean water is. But when I was on my second deployment, Pops passed away. The property was put into a trust managed by my sister Sarah in California, someone who knew nothing about Texas land law. It wasn't her fault, but it set the stage for everything that was about to go wrong. I came back to Texas in August of 2023, expecting to enjoy some well-deserved downtime. As I drove down that gravel road, past the oak tree where I'd carved my initials as a kid, I thought I'd find the same old peaceful land, rolling hills, the dam glistening in the sun. But as I turned the corner, it hit me like a brick. Construction trucks, survey stakes, and men in hard hats were everywhere. My land, my family's land, was being turned into a neighborhood. 35 homes, no less. The sound of gravel crunching under my boots felt different, angrier. I marched up to the construction foreman. I was ready for a fight. "Sorry, buddy," he said. "Not sorry at all. We've got permits. This is Willowbrook Estates now." I didn't even know how to process that. My mind was spinning. I called the local police, and Officer Martinez showed up, looking uncomfortable. He explained that the HOA had filed an adverse possession claim while I was overseas. The law says if no one's actively using land for a certain period, someone else can claim it. A law that's meant to protect abandoned property, but in this case, it was a tool for greedy developers. And that's when I saw her. Maggie Thornwell, the HOA president, rolling up in her golf cart like a suburban warlord. She smiled that syrupy smile, the kind that makes your skin crawl. "Your family abandoned this land. Honey," she said, acting like she was doing me a favor. "We're just putting it to good use of the community." But here's the kicker. The construction crew had diverted the creek that feeds into my dam. The water level was dropping every day. I was watching 45 years of water management, built by my grandfather, get stolen right in front of me. Her parting words echoed in my head. "Should have stayed closer to home, soldier boy." And that's when I knew. This wasn't just a land dispute anymore. It was war. At first, I thought I could just call a lawyer, fight this thing in court, and be done with it. But I quickly learned that this wasn't going to be as easy as I thought. The lawyer I hired, big mistake, quoted me $85,000 just to challenge the zoning change. And as I looked deeper, I realized how deep the corruption ran. While I was overseas, Maggie's husband, Rick, who just so happened to be on the city council, pushed through an emergency zoning modification. My family's land, once agricultural, was suddenly zoned for residential development. The fix was in, and the system was rigged against me. But I wasn't about to give up without a fight. I turned to what I knew best, engineering. I started digging into county records, trying to find a way to use my knowledge of the land and water rights to my advantage. What I found blew my mind. Pop's original dam construction permits were still on file, and they were beautiful, signed by the Army Corps of Engineers, giving the dam federal jurisdiction. That was my ace in the hole. Here's something you might not know. Any dam built with federal oversight automatically falls under federal law. That means local HOAs can't override it. But wait, it gets better. While I was at the courthouse, I found something else, a 1923 water rights deed. My great-grandfather had purchased senior water rights to the entire Willow Creek watershed, rights older than the city itself. This wasn't just about the land. They were stealing my water, too. The legal battle was far from over, but I finally had a weapon. The fight wasn't going to be won in a courtroom full of corrupt lawyers and politicians. It was going to be won with the truth, backed by federal law and decades of history. But Maggie wasn't about to roll over. She'd go to any length to get what she wanted. The more I dug, the more I realized the depth of their scheming. Maggie had been playing a dangerous game. She organized a local news broadcast about how dangerous my dam was. She talked about the safety risks and how it posed a threat to the families living downstream. It was all a lie. My dam had passed its safety inspections with flying colors. But what really set me over the edge was when I found the original Agricultural Flood Management Covenant. This document was my game changer. It wasn't just permission for flood control. It was a legal obligation that superseded any HOA agreements or city ordinances. I kept digging. I found more inconsistencies, zoning changes, fraudulent environmental assessments, insurance claims that didn't add up. But it wasn't just the paperwork that gave me hope. It was the realization that I had something they didn't: time. And with time, I could act. But I needed the right moment. The more I researched, the more I realized that this wasn't just a property dispute anymore. This was a full-blown environmental fight. Maggie's plans to divert Willow Creek weren't just destroying my family's legacy. They were destroying an entire ecosystem. The creek was the lifeblood of the community. Without it, downstream farms would dry up. But with my dam, I could restore that flow, and that's exactly what I planned to do. Maggie wasn't just going to sit back and let me take control. She escalated things quickly. I started getting calls about harassment, people from the HOA showing up at my property, filing bogus complaints, trying to intimidate me into giving up. They even contacted my sister, Sarah, trying to convince her that I was unstable. I wasn't going to fold. The more they pushed, the more I pushed back. I began setting up cameras around the property, documenting everything. I measured the water flow at various points along Willow Creek, taking timestamp photos to show how the water level was dropping daily. It wasn't just about legal paperwork anymore. It was about building a case that would stand up in court. But even with all the evidence I had, I knew this fight wouldn't be won in the courts. This was going to take something more, something bigger. I started getting phone calls from old Army buddies, people who understood what it meant to stand up against a system that was rigged. One of them, Tony Riggs, worked for the EPA now. He'd been with me in Afghanistan, and now he was my ally in this fight. Tony told me something I hadn't even considered. If they were diverting a natural waterway without federal permits, that was a Clean Water Act violation. And if my dam had federal jurisdiction, Maggie's crew was in deep trouble. This was a moment I knew I had to take action, and fast. The HOA had been pushing their construction through without any concern for environmental laws. But I had the law on my side now. This wasn't just a battle for land. It was a battle for the future of Willow Creek. I had a plan. It wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. Maggie thought she could steal my land, my water, and my legacy. But what she didn't know was that I had something far more powerful than a piece of paper or a legal loophole. I had the dam. I began making preparations. I checked the dam's hydraulic systems, testing every gate, every control. Pops had designed this dam for flood management, but it was about to serve a new purpose, one Maggie never saw coming. I started laying out the logistics. I calculated the exact amount of water needed to restore Willow Creek to its original flow path. The timing had to be perfect. If I did this too soon, it might cause real damage. But if I waited too long, the HOA might finish the development and the land would be lost forever. But I had another thing in my favor: nature itself. The weather forecast called for heavy rains in the coming weeks. Perfect timing. I just had to make sure I controlled the flow at the right moment. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Maggie and Rick had already proven they'd stop at nothing to get what they wanted. They'd tried to sabotage me. They'd try to turn the community against me, and they'd do everything in their power to make me look like the bad guy. But I wasn't going down without a fight. The day had come. The rain was starting to fall, heavy and steady, just as I had predicted. The construction crews were working overtime to finish the homes, but I had the upper hand. I stood on the porch of my farmhouse, watching as the first few inches of water began to gather. This was it, the moment where everything would change. The spillway gates had been carefully calibrated. The water would flow, and it would restore the creek to its natural path. Maggie and Rick wouldn't know what hit them. I was ready to show them just how powerful water could be. The dam, the creek, the land, they were all about to speak for themselves. But Maggie had her own plans. She was riding around a construction site, still on her golf cart, with that same smug smile. But this time, there was panic in her eyes. She knew what was coming. As I watched, I could see her rallying her troops. She was preparing for her next move, turning the media and the community against me, framing me as a dangerous, unstable veteran. As I stepped onto the dam controls, my hands steady and my heart racing, I saw the first signs of the floodwaters starting to build. The creek was beginning to fill, and I knew it would soon burst. The once dry riverbed was now a natural channel again, restoring the flow of water that had been stolen for so long. But Maggie wasn't about to let me have the last word. I watched her storm onto the construction site, calling for reinforcements. She was broadcasting her desperate message to the media, claiming that I was threatening to destroy the homes of innocent families. It was the same twisted narrative she'd been pushing, but this time it didn't hold up. She couldn't drown out the truth with her lies. The water was flowing freely, naturally, in the way it was meant to. It wasn't flooding anyone's homes. It was simply returning to where it had always been. And yet, Maggie's hysteria was growing. "Is attacking our children's homes," she screamed. It was a moment of pure irony. The homes she had stolen were the ones at risk, not the ones that had been here for generations. I stayed calm. I had no time to explain myself to her. I was here to show the world what real justice looked like. As the floodwaters reached their peak, I saw the media helicopters overhead. They were capturing everything: the restored creek, the flow of water, and the moment when Maggie's plan started to crumble. The flood didn't just restore the creek, it restored a sense of justice. The local news started reporting on the situation. They couldn't ignore the truth. The spillway opened, and instead of destruction, the land was healing. The water flowed exactly where it was supposed to, and the downstream farms were receiving their much-needed water again. Maggie and Rick were scrambling. The flood didn't cause any damage. It simply showed how their development had been built on lies. Maggie's media blitz quickly lost steam as people started to see what was really happening. The flood was just water, nothing more. It was nature finding its way back home. The city's response was swift. The environmental agencies launched investigations into the construction company. It was revealed that they had misrepresented the flood risks in order to secure insurance, and the fines started rolling in. Rick's construction company was forced to halt all operations. Maggie, who had been at the center of it all, faced massive fines and legal battles of her own. The community, once divided, began to unite. The flood didn't just protect my land. It protected the community. It proved that we could stand together against corruption and greed. People who had once been silent now spoke out, sharing their stories of how Maggie and her HOA had tried to force them out for years. As the water receded, things began to change. The Willow Creek Restoration Association was born, a new organization dedicated to preserving the land and its natural resources. The community became stronger, united by the fight for what was right. And the best part? The development that Maggie had fought for was now a thing of the past. The land had been restored to its rightful purpose. Looking out over Willow Creek, I realized something important. It wasn't just the land or the water that had been restored. It was a community. We stood together against a corrupt system, fought for what was ours, and won. What Maggie and Rick didn't understand was that this fight wasn't just about property. It was about legacy, justice, and doing what was right for the people who came before us, and for those who will come after us. I'll never forget the look on Maggie's face when she realized her empire was crumbling. But it wasn't just her loss. It was a victory for everyone who'd ever been pushed around, for anyone who'd ever fought for what was theirs. That moment wasn't just about me. It was about all of us standing up for the land, for the water, and for the truth. If you've ever faced corruption, fought for your rights, or stood up to injustice, I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below and tell me about your experiences. Let's keep this conversation going, because the more we talk about these things, the stronger we get. If you like this story, make sure to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories about standing up to corruption. Next week, I've got another wild story for you. This one's about a city that tried to steal my neighbor's solar farm and how she turned the power off during the mayor's wedding reception. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, water finds a way, justice finds a way, and communities that fight together win together.